My name is Frank Hoppy. Again, I am one of the counselors. This time it's going to be kind of like a team effort today, as far as like the presentation. The whole counseling department will introduce themselves first, and today our focus will be progress monitoring, BIP progress monitoring. So, counselors, you want to just introduce yourselves?
Hello, I'm Jason, school psychologist at 238.
Hey, I'm Ryan, social worker. I'm at 264, 215, and 30.
I'm Sydney. I'm one of the school counselors, and I'm at 180 and 464.
And we also have on today Amanda, who just joined us this year. She's working half with us and half with her other school. Amanda, you on? You want to say hi?
I am. Hi, guys. Hi, everybody. Glad to be here.
And Amanda is at 322 currently.
Oh, yes. 322.
So I'm gonna go start. We're gonna start off. So today's focus is bid progress monitoring. Obviously, we know that there's a lot of information and a lot that goes into progress monitoring and understanding that process. We did our best to kind of put it into something that's just a general understanding of the process, so that you get like just a full understanding of what it means to properly progress monitor a BIP, what it is first, obviously, and then how to properly progress monitoring it. But just know that this is a very, very intense process, and it requires a lot. And anything we don't get to today, we will, each of the counselors will be coming around to kind of support you with this process. But it's good that everybody gets a general understanding of how this process is and how it's supposed to be. So we're gonna let me just share, and then Ryan is gonna get us started. Ryan, you see this? All good?
Yeah, all good.
All right.
All right, great. Okay, so as was mentioned, so today we're talking about FBAs and BIPs. Like a show of hands, how many of you have a student with a BIP? Okay. Some of you do. All right, great. So at this point, you've all seen the progress monitoring sheets. You've all seen what a BIP looks like. You probably even know what the process of getting to that point is. But a lot of what we're going to cover today is really the significance of the FBA and BIP process, as well as how we're going to show that we're doing the work with our students, as well as how we are showing how well they've improved themselves. So first things first, how do we get to that FBA? We're looking at, we've seen behaviors. We know that there's something going on with the student. And we want to find out how to best support them. So what are the functions of the behavior? First things first, an FBA is a functional behavior assessment. We're choosing the behaviors or the problem behaviors, the targets that we want to focus on. And then we want to see what's the function of it. Are they trying to escape? Are they trying to gain something? Maybe it's attention, maybe it's access to an item. There's a lot of different functions that we might see. Your student might be leagues different than any other student who we've written an FBA or a BIP for. Once we have that idea, we're then going to design an intervention based around that. It is important to note, not all FBAs lead to a BIP. We'll get to a BIP in just a second, but not all of them lead to that. And then not all BIPs lead to other portions as well. But the first thing is, what are we seeing and how do we assess for it, right? So what are these interventions? First, we're going to look at changing maybe a setting event. Now, a setting event can be confusing sometimes. We've seen a lot of times where people will say like, okay, well, right before we ask them to do work, is that the setting event? No. A setting event is something that sets someone up for either success or failure. So if you haven't slept enough that night, if you are hungry, if you're not feeling very well, these are all setting events, something that sets you for the rest of your day. The antecedent is then what happens later on. Be like, I asked them to do work and they started screaming. I tried to give them this, they didn't like it, so they threw it off the table. Those are your antecedents. So we're looking at maybe changing those setting events. And if you've seen a BIP, you've seen setting event strategies and antecedent strategies are separated. That's what we're getting into today. We also might look at how to add a new routine for them or adjust the ones that they currently have. Maybe you've seen something work, not working as much anymore. You might want to adjust it a little bit. That's what we're trying to do and see here. And then finally, that last intervention might be a BIP. Now, many of you already said you have BIPs. I would imagine most of you have been through the process before of creating a BIP or seen what that looks like, even if you don't currently have a BIP student. But this is a behavior intervention plan. And it is a step-by-step process of how not just the classroom team, but anyone who interacts with that student will work with them. If you are seeing them once for a session per week, if you see a substitute teacher or a substitute paraprofessional, this is the thing that they should be able to read and know, this is how I work with this student, right? It is their guide to whoever they're working with. So our plan here is, how do you intervene with these targeted behavior problems that we've chosen? And how do we either reduce them or fully replace them? Now, a replacement for, screaming might just simply be requesting a break. There's a lot of different replacement behaviors that we've seen. You'll notice that they range a lot per student. Again, these will pertain to your specific students. That's how we're making them. Just like an IEP, it's individualized. Now, usually we are creating some sort of replacement behavior, but it's not just the counselors deciding this. This is a team effort. When you go around and make an FBA, the documents that are given out usually are given to a classroom teacher, but it's up to that whole team, the teacher in the room, the paras in the room, anyone who sees that student for a cluster or a related service. They can all add to whatever is on these forms, and we create this plan as a team. And then as a team, it's our responsibility to enact the plan together. If that kid is in the classroom, if they're on the playground, if they're in the lunchroom, whoever's working with them at that time, they're the ones implementing that plan. So we really are fully a team here on this. It is not a single person's responsibility. Next slide, please. Now, it is important to note that because a lot of our BIPs lead to a one-to-one paraprofessional. And before, when I said not every FBA leads to a BIP, because sometimes we realize the function is, easily managed. We don't need a full BIP. Now, let's say we do. Let's say we get to that BIP. Not every BIP is going to require a one-to-one paraprofessional. I know sometimes we've come to that moment where the reason we have it in the first place, the whole process, is because we want to add a one-to-one to that student. But not every BIP needs that. Sometimes the plan is solid enough and works well enough that just the classroom team can normally integrate it into the day and take care of it without extra support.
Ryan,
That is not always the case. Sorry.
Can I jump in there real quick, Ryan?
Absolutely.
I think it's very important that we have a better understanding of what when it comes to a BIP and a one-to-one and that process and what it really entails and what it really is, the way it's properly set up to support the classroom. A BIP is the key component of the process, right? The intervention plan is the key component. The one-to-one is just it's a support for the BIP. It's not a support for anything else but the BIP. So when you add a one-to-one to a BIP, it's to say the BIP, whatever interventions we outlined in the vid as a team, whatever interventions we outlined, to say those things help with this target behavior, whether it's to replace it or to get rid of it, altogether. These strategies are supposed to help with this target behavior. And in addition to that, we're saying that these strategies are so intense or require so much effort to carry them out, we may need an extra person on hand to support that. That is not always the case. And when you come up with a BIP, you have to consider all of these things, because we're trying to keep children in the least restrictive environment possible. We only go the next step if it's absolutely necessary. And in a lot of cases, there's times when there is a need for an extra hand, but there are times when there is not a need. And if we can carry out the BIP in the classroom without adding another person to it, that's what we want to do, and that's where we want to go. So it's very important to get that understanding, that distinction, that a one-to-one is not a requirement. It's not something that we should be working towards when we have a behavior problem. We shouldn't have a behavior problem and say we want the solution is a one-to-one. You have a behavior problem, the solution is a BIP, right? The BIP is the solution, and the one-to-one can be a support added to it.
And also, if I can just jump in, we were talking about this earlier. The presence of a one-to-one is the most restrictive service that you can provide on a child, right? So when a one-to-one is assigned, we have to acknowledge that this child is in need, is in the most need, right? That's what we are deeming this child to be in as a school. And so our goal, and we'll get to this a little bit later, is to work towards the removal of that one-to-one.
Yes, absolutely. So we do have that multi-tiered system of support where it's really only at the highest level are we even implementing BIPs in the first place, and then higher than that would be to add that extra support of the one-to-one. So it is that really restrictive environment for them. So this would be, again, to support the IEP and the BIP, the implementation of it. This is that extra support. When they are added to it, or if they are added to it, really, if they are added to it, the person who is the one-to-one can typically be doing the data collection and the student monitoring, and that's great. But it really still remains, even with that person who is my one-to-one is the student, it's still a full team effort. You should all be on top of this. And what that means is that even if the para is absent or they are on lunch, if a behavior is happening, data is still taken regardless. It is a consistent data collection process for progress monitoring. That's what we're going into after this. But it really needs to be implemented no matter the situation. If that student is in school, data is being collected for them. It is also very important to be checking in consistently. Stick with the counselor at your site. If you are ever confused about some of the levels or just what information is being taken, or if you have a new thought on a behavior, please consult your counselor before starting to take new data on things that are not on the BIP or the progress monitoring sheets. Next slide, please.
Well, I wanted to just also jump in and mention, off of Ryan's point. So not only should the data be taken throughout the day, regardless of the paraprofessional's presence, right? They might be at lunch, they might be absent, but also trips. If your class is out on a trip or an outlet, whether it's like a local trip to something local, or you're on a bus trip to somewhere a little bit further away, those data sheets should be traveling with the classroom team, para, classroom teacher, to collect that kind of information, even when we're outside of our regular environment.
And just to add on that, in addition to that, as far as the supervision of data collection, while obviously we work as a team, the teachers are just like they're the instructional lead in the classroom. They are the instructional lead in this situation as well. So we come in and we provide the support as far as giving your data sheets. We might pass along the BIP, even though that's still online. In CSIS, we might give you the BIP, a copy of the BIP, a copy of the progress monitoring tool. We can explain it and so forth. But then the collection process, it should be heavily supervised by the teacher and worked with together as part of the classroom team. But the teacher should now say, let's say, again, we were just talking about a para being out. Let's say the one-to-one assigned to the student is out that day. Then the teacher's job is to then step in and say, all right, maybe the classroom para will be collecting data today. Or in extreme cases, I got to collect data, or I have to communicate with my unit coordinator to get somebody that can help me if I can't do it myself, or the classroom team is so overwhelmed in that day, they need an extra support. But you still are part of that whole process and a part of leading that process in the direction it needs to go.
Mr. Hoppy, can I jump in here for a minute?
Yep.
So I think also something that we have to realize, and I'm loving that you're bringing up the regardless of who's there. I think what I've seen personally is that there is this marriage between the one-to-one para and their student. And it needs to be known that it's not just the para's responsibility for that student, it's the entire classroom team. And I think what I do see is sometimes, people saying, oh, that's not my student, or no, that's not my responsibility. That student in that room is the responsibility of every adult in that room. And I think we have to really, really keep that in mind. Again, there is no connection between a paraprofessional and one-to-one. The service is there. The service of the paraprofessional is there. And I think we need to take a broader scope of everyone keeping the eyes out and everyone contributing.
Yep. 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. It has happened, we're not trying to point fingers or name names, but we have all seen data that says blank is absent and they're not referring to the student. So it's really important and I've been at other schools that have also had paras absent. It's that doesn't mean we don't take data. Data is always taken. So now this is the progress monitoring. The progress monitoring is a every single day event. It is not end of the week event. It is every day. Someone needs to be taking data for this student. And that also pertains to days where a student has a great day. And we'll talk more about that later. But if they're here and they have a great day, that's a point of data for sure. It needs to be mentioned. So now when we are looking at a BIP, we are talking about implementation and we're talking about collection of data. There are many ways in which we do this. The one that we use most effectively is the progress monitoring tool. It will be shown later and it includes a link later. At this point in the school year, you should have all received the BIP as well as data sheets pertaining to taking the data for every student in your class that has a BIP. The BIPs themselves should be on a wall, clearly visible for people to see, so that they can engage with them. If you have substitutes coming in that day, they should be able to take it off the wall, read it, and understand who they're working with that day. It's very important to keep on top of that. When we are collecting data, some of the most important things we're looking for are frequency, duration, and intensity. We want to see what day was it, how many times did this happen that day, what period did that happen that day. We also want to know duration. When's it starting? When's it ending? And you could write the total time. We could also calculate that ourselves, but you could do start and end time. That's fine. And then intensity being incredibly important. At the very bottom of your progress monitor sheets, you're going to see a 1 through 5 level. Those are auto-populated from the BIP itself. We have your levels designed. And if you've ever created the FBA and BIP with the counseling team and the rest of the staff working with that student, you've been part of creating those intensity levels. We need to make sure we're knowing exactly which level was hit at that point. And then finally, the replacement behavior itself. This will be on your BIP and as well as the progress monitoring sheets. This is where, and then right below that is a box. A lot of times we get a box that has anecdotes. That's helpful to a degree, but not where it would be put. That box is for tally marks that tells us when the student has used their replacement behavior, either on their own or with support from the team.
And we're going to go through that in more detail as we come along. Just wanted to add a little piece of information there. The BIP, for most part, when a lot of BIPs that come our way is the FBA and the BIPs are already created, and the information as far as the target behavior and all these things, behaviors to track, are already outlined in the BIP. Now, when that comes into us, we've already, just as Ryan said, we auto-populated onto the progress monitoring sheet, and that has to be progress monitored for X amount of time without us touching it, essentially. Now, we don't change the BIP, we can't change the problem behavior, because for the first couple of weeks of school, we noticed that this child is not doing what the thing says, or first week of school, the child's not doing what the problem behavior that's identified in the BIP is. They're doing something else. That's not how it works. You don't just change it. You progress monitor and on that specific behavior, the way it's outlined. And if you're not seeing that behavior, you're noting that it's not occurring. And then from there, at the first progress monitoring review meeting, which is a meeting to go over how well the BIP is doing, then we make decisions on whether to discontinue that one. And if there's another behavior that needs to be focused on, there's a whole process that starts again with the FBA, and actually just before that, studying the behavior and putting interventions in place to address it. So it's not that it's a very simple, like, oh, it's not this behavior, it's this behavior now. It's not. It's you have to study the behavior, determine the function, and go through a whole process. So whatever behavior is in that BIP, if it's already done prior to getting to us, we've got to progress monitor and follow the process for it before we change anything.
It's also important to note that we do take data and we do collect those 10 days of data. Usually we look at like a 10-day portion, even though it's every day, we're looking at a big 10-day portion where we're collecting about every 10 weeks for progress monitoring, like the official reports of that. So I know for me, that's mid-October, that's mid-December, that's March and June. I believe that's kind of across the board.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, right. We're tracking every 10 weeks or 8 to 10 weeks as you think, and different kids and different situations will be different, but definitely want to keep it within that margin.
Yeah.
And the 10 days is for FBA processes when you're trying to assess the behavior and set a baseline. Ryan, I think this passes off to Sid, right?
Yes. That is also
Right. All right. Hi, everyone. So now I'm going to go into explicitly what's on the sheets that are handed out to Progress Monitor. Right now, I'm just going to kind of read what's on the sheet, explain it, and then we're going to pull up a sheet just so everyone can kind of get familiar with it. So the first section you'll see is the demographic and period information, and that really is just the basic information, the weeks that you're tracking. So if it's a 5-day week, like next week is October 7th to October 11th, you would put those dates on top. For example, this is a 3-day week, so you would put September 30th to October 2nd, and then on the sheet you would just specify no school, October 3rd and October 4th. You'll also see a place for the student's name. You'll also see a place for the person who's tracking the data, so that can be the teacher, a para in the room, anyone who is part of the data collection, their name should be put on there. And you'll also see a place just for whatever class they're in, example, V13, Y24, X20, whatever your class number is that you're in, just so we can keep track of which class the kid's in. Then underneath, you'll see problem behavior, and this is the target behavior that is listed exactly in the BIP under the identify/define target/problem behavior. It is coming directly from the BIP. It is what is written, what we inherit when we get new students, etc. And that is typically a category. So two of the most common you'll see are aggressive behavior and non-compliant. From my experience at 180 and 464, that's typically what we'll write or we'll see when we get new kids in. And lastly, there's a section for the alternative/replacement behavior, and that is also listed exactly from the BIP, and it's what we would like to teach the student to do to minimize that problem behavior, and it's typically seen as a goal in the IEP also. Next slide, please. So the next part of the sheet that you get, this is the bulk of it, this is the data point collection. So the first part of the sheet you'll see is the date. So that's just the date the incident happened. If it happened today, September 30th, you write 9/30. And typically this will be written multiple times a day on a sheet because we will typically see multiple occurrences. Of course, we'll talk about if there's no data on the sheet, what to do, but typically we will see multiple times a day. This date's written. Then the next part is the activity/period/subject, and you can you'll write the time what activity or what was going on at the time the student was doing. So this could be lunch, recess, transition, math, field trip, etc. Just so you can keep track of what time of day this happens, as well as so we can kind of see if there's a trend, like, hey, like these behaviors are really happening during lunch. Maybe there's something during lunch that might be triggering the students to partake in these behaviors. And the last part, what you'll see is the time. So this is the start time. When did the behavior start? The end time. When did the behavior start? And then the total time. And how long did the behavior last? And a minimum of it should be recorded 1 minute. So if the student, for example, one of their intensity is flops on the floor, and they flop down the floor for about 30 seconds, but then they get up, just put it down as 1 minute. Or if it's longer, then obviously you'll write longer. And just note that every incident of the target behavior will get its own line So if the student is flopping on the floor and also yelling, and that's part of it, that will go separately on the line, okay? On separate lines, sorry.
And we just want to just reiterate that the minimum we're going is 1 minute. So if a child displayed the behavior for 30 seconds, we're not writing 30 seconds. We're not writing a minute and 30 seconds. We're just writing a minute, and then we're moving on to the next one. If it goes beyond a minute, then you track it based on that. Again, but we're keeping it on the minute mark. We're not going seconds. Too much calculation.
Thank you. And the last part of the slide, the last part of the sheet, sorry, you're gonna see is intensity. I'm gonna touch on it, and then I'm gonna pass it off to Mr. Jason, and he's kind of gonna finish and go more into depth about the intensities. So this is an intensity scale from 1 to 5. You'll see that on the side of the sheet, and it has a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it's a place where you can circle it. Each intensity level is going to be described at the bottom of the sheet. So you'll see it's like 1, like it could be refuses to follow directions for a non-compliant student. 2, flopping on the floor, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is outlined with specific behaviors from the BIP that we should be looking for in order to track the data. And each one of these specific behaviors is attached to a number that you'll see at the bottom of the sheet. Like we said, each specific behavior is a type of a part of the target/problem behavior. So for example, if the student has a non-compliance BIP, you might see refuses to follow directions, flopping on the floor, throwing pens or toys across the classroom, climbing on furniture if they're not being compliant for the non-compliance one. And each type of target/problem behavior has a 1 to 5 level for how it will impact the classroom. And just to note that each type of and/or level of the problem/target behavior displays is, even if it's almost simultaneously requires its own line of tracking on the sheet. And please, please, please do not circle more than one intensity on a line. If there is more than one intensity, it should go on 2 separate lines. If they're doing the 2 and the 3, do it 2 on one line, 3 on another, just for our data purposes.
I got Ms. Tuckman with a question, Ms. Sydney.
Yes, Ms. Tuckman.
Hi. This is different guidance than we've been given in the past. We were told that if a student is displaying an intensity level of 4, that's the number that we should circle, regardless of the other behaviors with less intensity that we might see for the same incident.
Okay, so we are revamping a lot of this, and we're aware that there has been different guidance when it comes to how to track the data. We're revamping a lot of this, and we've gotten guidance. And as far as going forward, the way we're going to do this is that you're going to track the behaviors as they come. So if a child starts out with a level 1 behavior, right, a first level behavior, and does it for a couple of seconds, right, and then jumps immediately to a second level behavior, right, you're going to focus on the second level behavior, as long as like that first level behavior, it comes like literally right afterwards. Okay, we're not going to keep, but in the event that a child has been doing that first level behavior for over a minute, at least a minute, you want to track that behavior too, because what we've been finding is that there's a lot of circling of multiple levels on each line. So you'll have on Monday 12 something time, child displayed a behavior, and then you'll see 1, but then you'll see a 2 circled, and a 3 circled, 4 circled. That's not how you're supposed to collect it. Each line is supposed to have its own intensity level. So if a child, I would say if your child is only displaying that first level quickly and then jump to the second level or the third level or the fourth level, you're going to track that highest level 1, because it essentially ends there quickly. But if a child is just displaying a 1 level, it has been displaying a 1 level behavior for more than a minute, I would say, and then continues to escalate and jumps to a second level, then we have to track each one of those. So you'll track the 1 level first, you write that on the first line, circle the 1 level, and then you'll track the next level, circle it, and you keep going. We're supposed to be tracking each of those behaviors because we want to know, we don't want to make it seem like the child is only doing level 4 behaviors. We want to know that the child is starting at level 1 behaviors, because eventually what we will do is we're going to try to intervene at the level 1. Because if we can get them at the level 1 to stop and de-escalate the situation from there, they won't get to level 4. Does that make sense?
Somewhat, and I have a very case-specific question that I will ask when the meeting is done.
No
Thank
problem.
I appreciate it.
No problem. Where are we at, Sid? Did you finish this one?
We finished this slide, and now we're going on just to show the sheet.
Okay. Give me a second. All right, so it's not allowing me to click. Give me 1 minute. Let me just pull this up. And there you go, Jason.
Okay. Okay, folks. So this is just basically going off the conversation that we just had now. Hoppy, I know it's small, but Hoppy, if you can just kind of guide me with your cursor so that, right?
Gotcha.
So at the top, Sydney was talking about the week consists of. Now, someone just texted me earlier. In our school here at 238, we go from Friday as the first day to Thursday as the last day of the cycle. And that's because we have clubs and other things that kind of are based off that. Your school may be different. Your school may be Monday through Friday, right? So you're basically going to just say the week starting Friday, the whatever Friday's date to Thursday, the date, okay? Obviously, the next thing down is the student name and the staff member's name, the person who is the usual one-to-one para. If there isn't a one-to-one para assigned for the student, this is where the teacher's name is going to go. The class is right there. You don't have to say the subject. You can just say V20, V19, or whatever the class is. Below where it says problem behavior, this is going to be pre-populated for you. This is where the behavior of concern is listed. And it might be listed along with 5 intensity levels. It might not. It might just be aggressive behavior, physical aggression, or escaping behaviors, right? And so that's going to be pre-populated for you to see. If we go, since we're talking about behaviors, Hoppy, can you scroll to the bottom? Down here on the bottom left, you see a blank numbers 1 through 5. This is where the 5 intensity levels that we've just been talking about. Frank was just talking about level 1, level 2s, and how long should we wait? Should we track it? This is where you're going to see those levels of behavior listed, with the 1 being the least impactful behavior and 5 being the most impactful behavior. And all of this is pre-populated onto the form and decided by the FBA and BIP team, essentially the teacher, parent, counselor, and all those involved in that process are going to decide, here are the behaviors that are the most challenging related to physical aggression, for example, listed in ascending order, or more in ascending impactful order, right? If you can go back up to the right there, thanks.
And they're all done in the BIP already. So they're
Yes.
already established in the BIP.
Mhm.
We will take it and we will kind of just essentially put it into this form, but they're already established as those are the behaviors.
Okay, so the date, as you can see, the date column right now, if you think about your child, for the most part, we're going to be having children that, I know there are some that have very few behaviors and some that have a lot more. Essentially, we're going to be seeing multiple dates of this, multiple entries of the same date, right? So today is September 30th. If your child is maybe an average child with a BIP, which I'm going to throw out a bogus number, maybe 4 or 5 incidents, between 3 and 5 incidents per day, you're going to have 3 entries of September 30th, September 30th, September 30th. And again, as Sydney mentioned, the activity is the subject, what was happening, not what was happening, but the subject that was going on. Was this ELA? Was this math? Was this gym? Was this lunch? Obviously, the start time is the next column over. You should be taking note when the incident begins, even if it's a level 1, right? For many of our level 1 behaviors, there are something that's sometimes not so easily noticed, like maybe tapping on the floor, or perhaps getting out of your seat and wandering around the classroom, right? And when that begins to happen, you get, look at your watch, take note of the time, and then we want to take note of the end time. And as we mentioned earlier, sometimes these behaviors are 5 seconds, 10 seconds for the get out of your seat kid, right? He gets out, begins to wander. The teacher or the paraprofessional say, "Hey, Johnny, can you please get back to your seat?" And he does, hopefully he does. And then we note the end time, right? Usually that's going to be a minute, like under a minute or something like that. So we're marking the end time. Could you scroll up a second, Frank? Right. Okay. So then the total time. Again, we're going to be dealing in one currency, just minutes. I hope we don't get to hours, but we're dealing in 1 minute to 30 or 40 minutes if necessary. And the next column over is the intensity level. So this is the conversation we were just having earlier with Ms. Tuckman, where you're going to circle the intensity level of the behavior that we just saw. As Sydney mentioned, we are going to be looking for one circle in each entry, not multiple circles. And again, if the behavior is happening for a short period of time before moving into another behavior, perhaps a level 2 behavior that happens for a short period of time before escalating to a 3 or 4 or 5, then yes, we're going to note whichever is the highest behavior in that behavior chain. If, however, the behavior that initiates is a low-level behavior, a 1 or a 2, and it persists for a longer period of time, and then the child does something that is a 3 or 4 or 5, something of a higher intensity, we're going to make sure that we note that level 1 or 2 behavior is being noted and documented as 2 minutes, 3 minutes, or whatever it was. And then that upper level behavior is also being documented as a separate event. Okay. I think Ryan was mentioning earlier that tally section on the right side there. If you can just, there you go, Frank. That is the replacement behavior frequency tally. So right above this box, you should see something that says alternative or replacement behavior. Now in that box should be also pre-populated a behavior that we want the child to engage in instead of the behavior that they're doing, that's causing this problem, right? So in the case of aggression, for example, we might want the child to use their words or to signal a teacher. Perhaps they want to, if they're using physical aggression, for example, as a way to escape demands in your classroom. Well, what are some other ways that we can provide the child a break or some type of escape, right? And so those behaviors and those skills are going to be listed up in that alternative replacement behaviors. And then in the box directly below, we're just going to be literally tallying how many times has this child engaged in this replacement behavior. It doesn't matter on what days they do it. It doesn't matter, like there were 2 behaviors on Monday and 3 behaviors on Tuesday and no behaviors on Wednesday. No, it's just a straight tally of how often we're seeing this in a week, because that's what this covers, five school days, right? Or however many school days in the week. All right, and that's pretty much the form. That's pretty much the form. Frank, if there are no questions or any questions, we can address them at the end, but we'll just kind of finish up. So this is, again, the progress monitoring tool on the bottom. On the right-hand side of the progress monitoring, you'll see these kind of pre-populated statements that say only impacts the student, to impacts everyone in the class, and 5 is impacts the entire school or seriously endangers seriously dangerous or violent behavior. Okay, so we're often co-located in other schools, and a lot of these things on the right-hand side do not necessarily pertain to us. This is written for the General Department of Education, and oftentimes these descriptions and designations don't apply to us in 75. What you need to be focusing on is the 5 intensity behaviors on the left-hand side, which will say, right, number 1, tapping with a pencil, all the way down to number 5, which throwing furniture or biting or hitting someone, right? So we want to focus mostly on these behaviors on the left. We're not really paying attention to the descriptors on the right, okay?
Yeah, they don't always correlate directly. So this is why this will almost always be always, I would say, already identified. So you're just looking for these behaviors and tracking it based on that.
Okay, so the alternative replacement, we talked about the tally, track number of times a student displays the alternative behavior. And why do we do this, right? Is the child engaging in the new behavior? Not only do we want to see a reduction of the target behavior, the problem behavior, but we would like to see some increases in the replacement behavior or the pro-social behavior. If we have a child who seeks attention and is hitting others or doing inappropriate things to others, we want to see that the behavior of getting attention appropriately, however that looks, is increasing and that negative behavior is decreasing. So this is why we take the tally. Oftentimes people will write anecdotal information in there, like hit teacher or smack student in the back of the head. This is not an area to write those notes. Certainly we don't want those children doing those things, but that is not the right area to be kind of anecdotally recording that information. That is for tally marks, right? Tracked independently, not connected to the problem or target behavior. So the next bullet point here is no behavior days. There are some times, especially for those students who are improving, there may be a day where there isn't a behavior. Literally, the child does not engage in any of the 5 behaviors listed. We should note that. You should have, today's September 30th, put a line through and literally write no behaviors occurred today or no behaviors, so that we don't think that data wasn't taken. We can be aware that there was data being taken on this child and that they didn't do anything today. And finally, absence. Same thing. When a child is absent, it doesn't mean that we're not recording data. I know that sounds silly, but all we need to do is just literally mark the date, September 30th, child absent, student absent, so that we don't think that, oh, this child didn't do anything on this day. Well, he wasn't here, right? As opposed to the other day, the previous bullet point where there literally were no behaviors and the child was here. So we need to be very clear with when the child's here, when they're not, and if something is occurring during those times.